And Tobias drills it. Sixers up one.
Embiid fakes, Embiid down the lane.
What is going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap Podcast. My name is Sean Barnard, and it is the day we have finally been waiting for, as we are now here and James Harden is no longer here. So I feel like I've talked about James Harden more than I have not talked about James Harden this week, but I've yet to do it with my esteemed co-host, James Birrane. So, James, how are you today? What's your vibe check right now?
I feel great, man. This was I actually mentioned this morning to one of my friends. I think this is the best spot that the Sixers have been in a really long time. Not only currently, but with the future that they now have with a lot of assets, a lot of expiring contracts, a lot of financial freedom. So I've been feeling really good about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I personally am frustrated once again by the late night breaking news, the 2 a.m. I am a night owl personally. This is twice now, both the James Harden trade and the Kevin Durant trade to Phoenix, which I've fallen asleep like 15 minutes before it's broken. And it's very frustrating to me.
Yeah.
So woke up with that at like 6 a.m. the next day, checked my phone and already was blowing up. And I'm just like, what did I miss? And lo and behold, here it is. So I want to begin this by kicking off, taking a look at the trade exactly. And then I want to get your thoughts on it and go from there, James. So this is what we know. It was a little shady of what the exact details were, but this is ultimately what the package looks like. And the Clippers are receiving James Harden, PJ Tucker, who made his debut last night, by the way, Philip Petrusev, and a future first-round pick. The 76ers are getting Marcus Morris, Nicholas Batum, Robert Covington, KJ Martin, a 2028 first-round pick unprotected, one first-round pick swap, and two future second-round picks. I actually believe it is they get two first-round picks, right? It's the 2026 and 2028. So Sporting News might be a little bit off with that one. So my fault, I'm showing that one. But your thoughts on the trade as a whole, James?
Yeah. I mean, when we're considering the circumstances, I think when you're looking at it from that lens, it's a very good trade. You move on from not only Harden, but I think we were all going to be worried about PJ Tucker and the way he was going to age over, this season and next year as well. So to move on from his $10 million to get some guys back that do similar things as PJ, obviously, if you're looking from like a star for star perspective, you did not get that. But what you did get was, we'll go into the picks and what those all mean, because I feel like there's a lot of additional meaning towards those, but you get two firsts, you get 2 seconds, which I know a lot of people are excited about as well, a pick swap, and a lot of guys that are expiring. And I think some of them will compete as well as a younger guy in KJ Martin, who I think a lot of us are excited about as well. So I think you did exactly what you needed to do here. And it goes from being like, you can't really trade James Harden for a lot, considering what he was, the situation they were in and what he had said in the past and saying he only wanted to play for one team. You now have what everyone who's trying to make a trade is desiring, which is future firsts, which they did not have in the past. So I think they set themselves up really nicely with this. And I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing is we could finally be rid of this. It feels a bit like the Ben Simmons trade where it's like, just thank God this is over. We can finally move on. This team has been playing well. They're really exciting, and we can talk about that rather than the cloud that was looming over us for so long. So I'm just pumped to finally be done with all that.
100%. And that to me is one of the biggest takeaways here is this is kind of a kick the can down the line kind of move that James Harden is no longer the Sixers problem, that they can now kind of move on. And to Nick Nurse and the organization's credit, I think they've done a really nice job of keeping the team separate with the James Harden drama. However, there was still this kind of cloud hanging over of, is he going to be here today? Is he actually going to practice? He's going to care on the floor. All these things are now avoidable. You don't have to worry about whatsoever. And you now have this cabin full of assets, which they just purely have not had. So Daryl Morey held strong to his belief that he needed to get either a star level player or a package that could attain a star level player in the future. I honestly think it's a better move to have this closet full of assets and be able to sit back and evaluate what this team truly is. That I think that's kind of how I'd categorize where these Sixers are at right now, or at a point of evaluation. Let's see what it looks like after the 3-game sample size has been pretty much phenomenal from Tyrese Maxey, but let's see how this looks after a longer stretch. What is the ideal pairing with him? Do we need to add a point guard, a guy that can run the offense? Is Maxey capable? Personally, I would lean toward the wing category is what I'm looking at. But what do you think is that missing piece on the Sixers team right now? Or are you still in sit back and wait mode?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some guys out there. There's obviously been a lot of names that have been thrown around. I think that this is going to be, and especially with the guys that have been traded over, if they were to get traded again, what is the 60-day rule? So we're looking at probably closer to a January date. I think things will heat up between, the new year and that trade deadline date. So at this point, I think you're pretty much just waiting. You're seeing what you have. You got a lot of guys that can, get in the mix here. You got to see what Rocco still has. You got to see if Marcus Morris can still play. Nicholas Batum, I think, is better than what people have been. I don't want to say giving him credit for, but I think that people are going to like him. He's a connector. He does a lot of things. So I think you just got to see how this plays out right now. And then at the end of, January, February comes around. If you feel like, hey, we got to make this push, this player is getting free. You've now given yourself the ability to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really strange being in this place considering the last 2 or 3 years we felt we're landlocked, we're contracted up, to the gills. We got no money to spend. We got no assets to trade. So now you have an excess of picks and damn near $70 million in open cap space. Obviously, some of that will get eaten up in Maxey's deal. And, but you have the ability to really build this team up how Daryl Morey sees fit, which he has not had the opportunity to do so. So we've flipped the script completely, and it's a really nice feeling to have, seeing all the rumors go around today. Oh, the Sixers are monitoring this situation or this
We're
player.
back.
Yeah, we're so back. It feels really good to be on that side of it. So they're definitely going to wait and see. It'll be interesting to see who becomes available, and I'm sure we'll be talking about. That'll be a big point of our conversations over the course of this season.
Definitely. And I do want to circle back to that topic here in a second. But as far as the players that did come in the deal with Robert Covington, with Marcus Morris, KJ Martin, and Nick Batum, obviously some cool storylines with the return of Robert Covington. He's already talking about wanting to break the Sixers all-time three-point record, which he's currently in second for. Marcus Morris, incredibly proud to be representing Philadelphia, a guy that is a North Philly guy, very involved in the city and does a whole lot for the community already. So cool that he's having his little homecoming. As far as the on-court stuff, are any of these guys you're particularly excited about, or does any of them stand out? Do you see any of them being difference makers, or what's your outlook on these players?
Yeah, so I think reasonably happy for all four of these guys that are coming in. Some of them are familiar with Pat Bev, I believe, as well, if I'm not mistaken there. But regardless, Marcus Morris seems like a good dude. He seemed very happy to be here, and that's great. I don't know what he has left. I haven't seen too much from him recently, but all these guys do a little bit of their own thing. I think they have distinctive skills. I think Robert Covington can be unique in, defensively, he's taken a step back, in his lateral movement. I think he guards down a little bit better. But I think in terms of this season, Nick Batum is the guy that I'm most excited about. Defensively, he's been fantastic over the last couple of years. He's really the type of wing defensive player that the Sixers have not had. I'm not saying he's locked down or anything. He's not Kawhi Leonard or OG Anunoby or any of those guys, but he's done a really good job. He's a connector offensively. He makes the smart reads and smart passes. In his better seasons shooting three, he's in the high 30s, right around that 40% range. Kind of does that corner three thing that PJ does. Like, I think if he's in that role, that PJ role, he will be a lot better for this team. Obviously without Harden creating for that, but I think Nick Batum I'm excited about, and KJ Martin, again, all we've done over the last couple of years is just ask them to put athletes that next to Joel Embiid, put guys that can run the floor and get after it. I think with Oubre and Maxey, obviously Melton, you add Paul Reed, and then you finally get in a guy like KJ Martin who can fly and do all these different things. Still pretty raw. A lot to work on with him, but for a guy that maybe might get some run here, I think all of them will get a chance to make their impact on this team. But I think KJ will have a unique chance to grow here, and I hope he sticks around for a bit, because I think his upside is intriguing.
Yeah, me as well. And it was cool, Pat Bev tweeting at Kenyon Martin, his father, saying, like, you took care of me, I got your son, basically, which is very cool. I do like that from Pat Bev. yeah, all these guys are a little interesting to me. That I think they're more than throw-ins in the way that I think people are kind of regarding them. Batum is just a super smart basketball player that reads the game incredibly well. One of the quickest releases across the entire NBA that I've seen him hit three-pointers where like he catches it in his shooting pocket and it like doesn't leave the side of like he needs no load up. It's just purely like goes, which is very difficult to do, and he does it at a high level. So I'm intrigued by that as well. He's retiring at the end of the season. I think he's by far the least excited to be here out of the guys that I think he wanted his Los Angeles send off. This is the bitter side of the business of him getting traded when kind of playing in his final days in Los Angeles. So I do feel a little bad for him in that regard, but I do think this is a great opportunity for him. That I still think this Sixers team is a contending team. I think that the very much the key that they're laying out is it's going to be Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and as many 3-and-D wings as they can find. And that's what they added. And it's crazy that we've pounded the table on how much they're missing these guys. And for the first time, it feels like there's an influx of those style of players. I do think they each have their little different pros and cons. I don't think any of them are super impact players, but I do think that they can fill their role. That I think Marcus Morris will have a little bit of a resurgence now that he is back in his roots. He talked about not feeling like himself in Los Angeles the past couple of years. He does still have it much more than his brother. That Marcus has always been the more talented of the two. And he after the whole Jokic thing with Markieff, I feel like Markieff Morris never got it back. Marcus still has a little bit to him. And they're both guys that, for all the Philly people checking out the Danny Rumpf Classic, that play in there year in and year out. And even just watching them in that kind of setting, like, it's very clear to me like Marcus Morris is significantly better than his brother. Kind of weird because they're twins and all that thing, but it's good that the Sixers got that one, I guess, is my point with all this. So I am intrigued by the pieces that are brought in. And KJ Martin, I mean, I'm not going to act like I've watched day in and day out of KJ Martin's basketball, but he was really regarded as one of those like potential building blocks of that Houston Rockets team. He ultimately got squeezed out with all the new talent that came in with the Jalen Green having an impact, all these other guys that they have brought in. Was traded to the Clippers for a pair of second-round picks, which isn't a crazy demand, but I remember all the Clippers fans being hyped about that. And he strikes me as a guy that has kind of a nose as a cutter. That I think is his outlook or outlet to getting playing time. And I think there's a chance that he can make it work. I totally agree with you. I hope he's around for the long term, that I hope that they do re-sign him. And all four of these guys are on expiring deals, which was very clearly a goal of Daryl Morey to make sure that they keep that cap flexibility. But KJ specifically is a guy that I would love to have for the long term. And it sounds like I would guess both Morris and Robert Covington would want to re-sign as well. So I am intrigued by all this, and it feels good to have a roster full of everyone that wants to be playing for the Sixers.
Yeah, no, and that became evident today listening to some of those interviews with them at practice, and none of them are listed on the injury report. Obviously, Batum is not here quite yet. He did post today, and he said, "Ready for the next chapter, like go Sixers." So I was low key worried that he like might just hang it up or something, before he even got over here. But he does look like he will be over here eventually. Not sure when that'll be, but I didn't see any of the new guys on the injury report for tonight, so they might be dressed. I know Nick Nurse alluded to them, dressing and maybe not playing. Kelly Oubre will slide into that starting spot, at least for tonight. So it'll be interesting to see if they do play. But I think all of them, like I said, will get a crack at it. Everyone's going to have a fair chance to kind of be part of this. It'll be nice to know, we were saying before this move that this is the deepest that they've been. Now they've added at least 3, if not 4 guys that can produce and play and some sort of role for this team throughout the regular season and, be part of that playoff rotation when it comes time. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, they walk at the end of the season and we kind of wipe our hands clean. And that makes a really big difference, I think, going forward. So, I think it was all in all, at the end of the day, I think from what you got and the freedom that it gives you, plus, the depth that it gives you as well, it's a really, really solid move.
Yeah, and James, I hate to do this. I want this to be a all positive podcast, but my feed is blowing up on James Harden's current press conference, and I do want to get your reaction to a couple quotes here. So I do want to begin with this one. James Harden says these Sixers had him on a quote leash last season. Quote, "I'm not a system player. I am a system." James Birrane, your reaction to that statement there?
He thinks he's Jalen Hurts, doesn't he? Not here, man. We're gonna. Honestly, dude, I'm cool with that. If he wants to go blow it up with LA, that's great. Not going to be here. And, you know what I will say is he may have been an integral part of getting Doc Rivers fired. So if that is the case,
is it a net positive?
Shout out to James. He did his job. But yeah, I am a system. We'll see about that, man. Maybe a couple years ago, I don't think so anymore.
What do you think his expectations are for what is going to happen on this Clippers team? Because I think it's a little different than what I think the Clippers have as an expectation for him.
I love to just be able to say it's not our problem anymore. I don't
For
know
sure.
what it is. I don't know how it'll work. Obviously, everyone saw the video of him getting into that locker room and how
Nobody looked happy.
you could like feel that in the locker room. So, I don't know, man. That's going to be a mess, but not our problem, thankfully.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a too many cooks in the kitchen situation overall. They do need a point guard. I get that. But we've only really seen like unselfish James Harden in small doses. Like, I don't think he's capable of doing that for the length of a season. And that's going to be entirely necessary on this Clippers team. And by the way, all Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Russell Westbrook are at their best when the ball is in their hand. There is one basketball that these guys can play with. And James Harden is a guy who does literally zero if he does not have the ball in his hand. I'm going to hit you with one more quote here, and then I will shift back to the Sixers as long as nothing else fires me up too much here. But we have from Tomer Azerly of Clutch Points. I'll even just play the audio here.
It's a lot, but not in the sense of, me. I think it was the injury aspect of it. I had never really been injured in my career. So just trying to fight through the injury and prepare myself and get myself out. Like even in that playoff series, I strained my hamstring a grade 2 and still come back and try to, like, that was just frustrating for me. So that was that. And then Philly is just changing my role, knowing I can give more, knowing I can do more. But if you want to be honest, like being on a leash and like me knowing in order for us to get where we want to get to, I was going to have to be playing my best offensively, whether it's facilitating and scoring basketball, and Joel as well. And I never really had that opportunity. So I think all that plays into where I am today, where whatever T. Lue and the coaching staff needs me to do, I've been prepared and been in both situations, whether me scoring, 15, 16 points or scoring 30, like, as long as we win the game and everybody's feeling confident and good about themselves. That's all that really matters.
All right, so James, I will give Harden the respect of playing the hits, having the same script of I'm only here to win. I don't even know what to exactly say here. I guess my frustration being is I'm so sick of the sacrifice bit. Like, yes, he sacrificed money. Yes, he declined his player option. You did not sacrifice on the floor. No, you didn't. I don't want to hear that you did all that. You changed your game. For sure, he changed his style, but that's called getting older. Every single player has to do it. And it's not sacrificing when the number one option on the team, the guy whose franchise this is, Joel Embiid, is significantly better than you at basketball at this point in his career. That's called, I don't even know what that's called. That's called just realism, reality, I guess. Like, you're
Playing
not sacrificing. Yeah, it's playing together. It's team sports. This is what basketball is. Like, you aren't sacrificing at Joel Embiid's benefit. That's just how it was. Joel Embiid's just better than you at basketball. That is the reality of the situation. And I hate how much he is playing into this sacrifice thing. But your reaction to all that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the credit is due that he did, take on the role as a facilitator and, I think he made Maxey better at times. I think he made Joel's life a little bit easier at times. But
Absolutely.
I think as we're seeing right now, like, had they just been in a right system and playing a different style of basketball that obviously Harden was reluctant to play, they could have been, helping each other out a long time ago. So I don't know, man. I think he lives in James Harden's world, and his view and perspective is, solely based on what he sees and feels, and that's totally fair. I'm sure he feels like he did sacrifice. I'm sure he feels like he can still go out there and get 35 a night. And granted, he did help us win a couple playoff games, but I think it's hard to ignore the fact that when he was given the keys, when he was given the ball and said, "Hey, we got to go score." There were a lot of times where he came up short in those situations and wasn't able to beat his defender, or relied on the step back three too heavily and didn't get to the rim, whatever it is, however you want to go about saying it. I don't know that that is all necessarily true in reality, but his reality would speak differently. So, the guy is just, doing his thing, I guess. I don't know. I'm happy to just like never hear from him again. They play at 10 o'clock every night. Like, I'm ready to never watch them play unless they're playing the Sixers, which they do 2 times in the span of like 5 days in March. So we'll get our fix. We'll get a Doc Rivers call on ESPN, and then we'll move on. But I'm okay just like not caring about it much, to be honest.
Dude, a Doc Rivers calling a Sixers versus Clippers game this year is going to be peak entertainment. I that has to happen. That absolutely has to happen. I can't wait for all the sneak disses in there from Doc himself for both sides of the equation here. That is going to be electric television. I cannot wait for that. And by the way, I did watch the Clippers versus Lakers last night. They showed James Harden more than they showed the actual game. It was like it was Taylor Swift watching an NFL game level of distraction here. Like they just kept panning over to this guy with his iced out chain and everything else on the bench. I'm glad we're over it. I'm glad this is a final chapter that is over in the Sixers story. But yeah, I mean, I just can't. I guess my final point on James Harden, and then we'll move back to Sixers world here. But we always talk about averages for guys. Like that's the statistic that is the go-to. This guy averages that. This is whatever, and that is like the reality of what. Like I understand that's probably the best way to do it. But averages are very different. That there's guys that can average 20, and they're going to get you 20 every night. James Harden averaged 20, but he'll get you 40 one night and he'll get you 2 the next. That's a little bit of extreme with that, but you get my point of it's all or nothing with him. And the last thing that I'll say about James Harden is it's so great when it's on, so bad when it's off. But the thing that I could not look past about him is he quits. That I saw him on the court twice with the Sixers quit. Back-to-back years in the playoffs quit. You cannot win with James Harden on your team. You cannot compete with a championship with James Harden on the team. He is a guy that will give up when it gets tough in the big moments, and you just can't have that with an organization. Joel Embiid is not perfect. I've seen him show levels of effort, which I wish I have not, but I've never seen Joel Embiid straight up give up. Even in Game 7, when they're getting blown out by Boston at home, there's at least some semblance of life in him, and there was not with James Harden, and that's why that chapter needed to be closed. And that's why I would really make the argument that this is addition by subtraction by taking James Harden out of the picture and allowing Tyrese Maxey to fully flourish. But to wipe it off, let's change, get away from the James Harden. I can't believe I got fired up about it, but those quotes were blowing up on my phone as we were recording this here. But to shift it back, I guess we talked about a lot of the assets. Do you have anybody in mind that you kind of want the Sixers to target as a specific guy or a specific position, or is it still sit and wait for you?
Yeah, it's definitely still sit and wait. I think that there's, the 3 or 4 names that have been floating around that obviously, I know people are kind of hesitant on Zach LaVine. I love him. I'm a UCLA basketball fan. There's nothing I can do. He was like my favorite college basketball player of all time. He would be incredibly fun. Obviously, there's defensive flaws and playmaking flaws, but he's a guy that can go out there any night, give you 50, even if he's not passing at all. But he's a slasher. He can also light it up from 3. Not to go into it too deep. OG Anunoby, I know, is a guy that gets thrown out there. I worry that Masai is way too stubborn to do that. There's a lot of I don't even know rumblings about Nick Nurse's relationship with those guys not being very good. So hard to tell there. I know Donovan Mitchell's name has been thrown around, and obviously we'll talk about that, but it feels like maybe they occupy a little bit of the same space, him and Tyrese Maxey. A guy I love, Lauri Markkanen. Like, what do the Jazz think there? How do they, how are they looking at their season and going forward? There's a lot of guys out there. It's hard to tell where they are right now. I think given that January timeline, I think is a fair point where teams will say, like, all right, we'll evaluate ourselves now. Are we buying or selling now? Are we trying to make a playoff run? Are we trying to rebuild? The Bulls are definitely a team that you're shorting them to fail. Obviously, you're betting on that. Utah's not going to be any good. Cleveland might be underperforming again. Like, who knows, right? So it's definitely nice to. Yeah, the Grizzlies.
5.
Yeah, who knows how
Marcus
this all
Smart.
plays out. Yeah,
Marcus Smart.
but we can talk about that later. But we'll there's a lot of guys out there, a lot of names that'll get thrown around. But I think it's wing is definitely where they're going to go for, and a defensive wing. That's why I think OG Anunoby fits the bill there. But we'll see, man. We'll see. There's they got variety, they got options here.
Yeah, definitely. And OG is the guy at the top of my list. And just one quick point that I want to make is there's all the talk about cap space. I believe the Sixers' plan should absolutely be to go out and trade for a guy on an expiring contract this year. And the reason that I feel that way, OG Anunoby, I'm going to use as the specific example here because he, once again, is at the top of my list and I think fits this description completely. You go out and trade for OG Anunoby, you get his bird rights, in addition to the expiring deal. Then he expires, he comes off, he's technically a free agent, assuming that they have every interest in re-signing him, which they should if this is the case that they do this deal. You then go out, you can sign another max level free agent and then re-sign both OG and give Tyrese Maxey a max contract, which he absolutely deserves and should get a blank check handed to him, and go above because of the capacity to re-sign your own players under the bird rights. This is a little more complicated this season because of the new CBA, but I think it's very important, and the Sixers can open themselves up to more money if they do it this way by going out and trading for a guy on an expiring with that they can attain their bird rights. So that to me is the blueprint, that you go out, you trade for OG Anunoby. Pascal Siakam's in a similar position, same contractual situation. I just don't like Pascal as much as I like OG, so I would prefer OG, but the similar mindset with that. But I think if you do it that way, that you can essentially have 4 max contracts on a team. It's not quite 4. It's going to have to be a little light and work the margins with some of these, but that is kind of the premise that I have floating around in my mind. Obviously, as I said, there's a lot of details that have to be paid for this, but you do open yourself up to that by going out and trading for a guy with an expiring right now.
Yeah, I think that they will make a trade. I don't think that they go through this season sitting on these picks, waiting around for someone to become available. It's a lot harder to attract a free agent like with no basis, no relationship, than it is to keep a guy who you've obviously gone out and traded for, hopefully made a playoff run with, and that guy I think is more likely just naturally to come back. On top of that, if you trade for him with his bird rights, you have the chance to pay him more money than him just leaving in free agency. One of the big things with this as well that we did not touch on, but trading for that 2026 first round pick, and obviously it's the least favorable of LA, Houston, or OKC. So a lot of people looked at that as like, oh, that was a throw in first. It doesn't really matter.
Still first.
It's still first, but the big point is the Stepien rule comes into play with the Sixers had they already traded a few of their future firsts. This gives them the flexibility to now be able to trade 3 of those first round picks. They have, the Clippers 2028 unprotected, which is probably the most valuable. They then have their, 2 of their first round picks that they can trade. One of them being in 2026, since they do have it now, they own another pick in 2026. One thing I will say is it becomes 4 picks once the draft comes around. So hard to know what they do plan on doing. They do have some more firepower once the draft rolls around. So that is something to keep an eye on. But I think 3 first round picks plus, whomever is enough to get a lot of deals done, especially in season. So I don't think that they sit on these picks. I think that January, February comes around, they hedge another team's, losing season, go out, get a guy that can contribute for this season and long term, and hopefully put it together like a really strong guard in Maxey, a really good defensive minded wing in X player, and then obviously always rely on Joel in this back end of his prime. So I think they're in a really, really good spot. A lot of money to spend, a lot of picks to trade. And we'll just be keeping an eye on the rest of the league to see how it shakes out. And, the Sixers are there to strike whenever it seems necessary for them.
Yeah, definitely. And that 2028 first round pick, as you mentioned, is kind of the crown jewel of this entire trade, because you sit back and think, as we brought up, that all these guys, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George, are past their prime and have injury concerns. They're also all expiring contracts at the end of this year, and who knows what's next. 2028 is a decent bit from here. That is 5 years from now. So what happens at that point, what will the Clippers look like at that point, is very uncertain. And I think there's a more legitimate chance than a lot of people are giving credit of that ending up like a high draft pick. So I do see the value. Like, I guess my point being, like, don't cough that up for nothing. And you should be hyping that up as much as you possibly can. That picture will be clear following the season when there's a little bit of who returns. I think all those guys want to be in LA and playing for the Clippers. They're all pretty local hometown guys, so I understand them wanting to be out there. And obviously, like, James Harden very clearly forcing his way there was with the intention of signing long term. But if this is what if this is what James Harden looks like right now, I feel pretty good about the draft pick riding on what he looks like 5 years from now, if I'm being honest. So I do think that's the biggest prize. I think that's notable, a stash that they added, and I'm pretty excited about, like, the value that it could bring.
Yeah, not to mention the Clippers don't have any other firsts. Like, they are in a position where they traded a lot of picks for Paul George that are obviously happening now and in the future. They've now traded their 2 future firsts for Harden. Like, they are in a position where they don't have a lot of draft equity going forward. So if guys leave and they don't get any big free agents, they're back into a situation where they're in no man's land again, where they had seen themselves before multiple times. So I don't know what their plan is. They want to, stack up for this new arena that they're building, and good for them, right? That's totally good for them. But the Sixers are now in a position where, they're also building an arena in the future. Not to go there, but right. But the Sixers are in a position now where they can get younger. They can get younger, and they can still be competitive because Maxey is now in the position where he's very good. We're hoping to see more from him, but like hopefully an all-star level season from him. And this guy is going to have to be either an established star of some sort, or a growing star of some sort. And because those first round picks are very valuable. So they found themselves in a really, maneuverable and good position, which is a weird thing to say because it has not felt that they've been there in basically the entire time that we've been doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's a bold move by the Clippers going all in to make your ceiling as a team like the 4th seed in the West. But thank you for taking James Harden from us. I'm enjoying to sit back and see however this plays out. I would, if I'm putting a bet on it, I would say not well. And I think that this implodes one way or another. I think as I mentioned, there's going to be too many cooks in the kitchen, too many egos in the building, and a lot of voices in that locker room. But not my circus, not my monkey, not my problem. So I'm going to sit back, enjoy the good vibes of the Sixers world. Feels good to have a little toss and turn and kind of change up in this. Any final thoughts on everything as a whole, James, before we wrap things up here?
No, I feel like we are in a spot where this season can become enjoyable, and everyone that was out, I feel like a lot of people were out, and rightfully so. I do not blame you for that. It's nice to have you back. We're feeling good. We got a good stretch of games here coming up, a lot of home games coming up. Stay tuned. I think there's going to be a lot of fun things happening, and I think Nick Nurse and the Sixers and Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid are taking us in the right direction, and I think at the end of the season we'll be looking really, really nice. So keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you to everybody for tuning into this episode. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, let me know a comment, give me your thoughts on the Harden situation as a whole, what your initial reaction is, or anything else you want to get off your chest. So thank you once again. Sean Barnard and James Birrane signing off here on Pick Swap Media.